bitter cold, howling winds, frozen ocean. Hundreds lost their lives in the race to be the first to discover the North Pole. But on April 6, 1909, after several daring attempts, the U.S. Naval Commander Robert Peary, his trusted assistant Matthew Henson, and their 4 Eskimo team members who are masters of survival finally reached the top of the world. Robert Peary received honor and recognition, while Matthew Henson, who was an African American, was met with racism and largely ignored. Over the years, Henson wrote a book about his adventures, and with the help of others, eventually was able to take his rightful place in history as the co-discoverer of the North Pole. The glory that came to this orphan, who had conquered so many odds, included honorary degrees, formal recognition from presidents and Congress, and a U.S. Navy ship named in his honor. Henson also received a hero's final resting place, along with Peary, in Arlington National Cemetery. Now his story is helping to launch the development of a new maritime museum in Camden.
He is a mariner, he's a navigator, a sailor at age 12. What could be better as a symbol for the new museum than this individual? He is someone who's increasingly recognized as a hero, but certainly in his day was not accorded all the due that he deserved. Here was an opportunity to really set things right and create what is, to the best of our knowledge, the first life-size, actually larger than life-size statue to Matthew Henson.
The founders of the museum wanted a sculpture of Henson out front to show how the abandoned Church of Our Savior was now about to take on a new life as the Camden Shipyard and Maritime Museum. The building was constructed in 1881 out of ballast stones brought over in sailing ships from around the world when Camden was a town of shipbuilders and dock workers.
In 1892, one of the expeditions of Robert Peary and Matthew Henson, they brought back 20 tons of stones from an island off Greenland. And those stones ended up here in the extension of this building.
John Giannotti won the competition to create the Henson sculpture. This Renaissance man taught for more than 30 years at Rutgers University and became chairman of the Fine Arts Department on the Camden campus. Now retired, he likes to sculpt, paint, and play music, and he's been working nights and weekends to complete the sculpture of a man he's grown to admire.
I knew very little about him before this project was brought up, and then the more and more I read about him, the more I understand, that this is a story worth telling. And in Henson's book, he talks about the fact that he crossed over the pole and came back and read the coordinates and realized, seeing his footprints, that he was the first one to actually touch it and reach it. What struck me were certain photographs of him that I found in some old books that just show his true character. What a great face he had.
Transforming historical figures and icons into monumental public sculpture has always been a passion for Giannotti. He has captured fearless firefighters, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist Madame Curie, and a person very close to his heart, Walt Whitman.
This is the third Whitman that I cast. One is in Tokyo and one is local. I like this one the best because it really brings out his features. I changed his face. I changed a lot of the things about the original sculpture. And I think it works a lot better.
Giannotti's hometown features one of the most surprising sculptures in his collection. Hadrosaurus folki commemorates the discovery in Haddonfield of the most complete set of dinosaur bones ever found in the mid-1800s.
It started out as sort of a normal project, but it quickly became something that was a total community effort. Over 500 school children came to my barn while I was working on this. I had each one of them take a little piece of clay and put it on the dinosaur to sort of pick their spot.
Students from the Haddonfield Middle School are also helping with the creation of the Henson sculpture.
I put mine right there.
Giannotti shows Henson with his favorite husky, King. The Eskimos taught Henson how to drive sled dogs, which was a critical factor in reaching the North Pole.
They're an important part of the story, a huge part of the story. And so I am working and struggling a little bit with trying to get this husky exactly right. It's a difficult dog to sculpt, by the way.
Sculpting is heavy work. This piece has taken several hundred pounds of special clay made of oil and wax.
You work it. You work it with a number of different tools and your fingers until you get it exactly right. This is the inspiration part. And then the real hard work starts, making the molds for this and making the castings.
A team of artisans brings the sculpture to life. Angelo Carolfi comes from a long line of sculpture casters. His expertise ensures that the artist's vision is realized.
The artists sometimes get very, very attached to their work. It's kind of like their baby. So when I go after it with grinders and saws and sawzalls and things like that, sometimes they can get a little bit tense. So John understands the process, so it's great working with John.
I'd like my artwork to have something a bit different about it that makes you want to stay a little bit longer, not see it just as an illustration or a well-made statue, but something beyond. And in this one, the idea of having Henson looking at you and waving, well, that comes from historic documents. But the idea of having his husky looking up at him, making that connection with Henson, and then Henson making that connection with you as the viewer, there's this kind of three-way conversation going on. And I think that's the real essence of this particular sculpture.
On a rainy day in Camden, some people called it Henson weather. The sculpture was unveiled.
And every city of any worth has art. Poor cities are deprived of art. Somebody who's such a heroic person and such an inspiration, to have him honored amidst the people, I find that to help with the saving of Camden.
The way that Henson was sort of partially recognized during his life, and there were a lot of doubters, and then finally the scientific community came around to understanding what he did. That's meant a lot in working on the sculpture itself. The idea that I could make a contribution to appreciating a person who had such a great accomplishment in his life and was ignored for most of his life is important to me.